You're listening to the See the Unseen podcast, where our number one focus is creating a little visibility for people who deserve a whole lot of spotlight. I'm your host, Melissa Dorjow, and I'm here to share some amazing stories that can transform and inspire lives. So get ready to take those blinders off and see the unseen. Welcome to the podcast. This morning, I want to talk to you about setting goals. And I'm really doing this for me too, but just to remind myself how important it is to set goals. Certainly in business, when I was leading a big team, I think it was really important to set goals. So you'd set 5 goals of these are the things that we want to accomplish this year, and then checking in each quarter to make sure that everybody's on track. And then, of course, at the end of the year, if we performed well, sometimes we received a bonus. So I think that, that was easy for me as far as setting goals in business. I would say too, at times I had gotten really, at one point in my career, I would say I was burned out, and I started working with a leadership coach, and he encouraged me to set personal goals as well. Now, if you know me, you would probably know that I love working. I guess I was kind of a workaholic, if you will. And so I never really had a hobby. I would take photographs of like my family and things like that, but not really a hobby. And so I didn't have things that I was doing in my personal life. So when I started working with a leadership coach, his name is Tavo Godfredson, who I spent about a year and a half with, was just life-changing for me. And he encouraged me to set personal goals. And so one of the goals that I set was to be a better mom. I was a single mom at the time, and I'm like, how can I be a better mom? The other thing was to meet the man of my dreams. And another goal was to go to Guatemala and help fit kids that needed wheelchairs. And I had never been, went out of the country to do something that was more philanthropic and mission driven. And so I put these things on a list of things to do. And what that did was, first of all, make them reality, make them real, and held me accountable because I was writing things down saying, this is what I'm going to do in a year. And I think I also added, I wanted to take a college course. And when I went to my boss at the time, I said, I signed up for this college course. I'm going to do this on, I think it's 2 nights a week. I promise that it will not distract me from my job. Because I was thinking, how do I do something else that I enjoy that's not my job? I thought, will my boss think I'm a slacker if I'm doing something enjoyable? And he looked at me, and I remember he said, Melissa, I said, this will not distract me from work. And he said, well, I hope it does. And I thought, what is he talking about? And he said, I hope it does distract you because you need a distraction. And I was so caught up in my work. I was all day, all night. That's all I thought about is how do we get the next thing? How can we become even more successful? And, I never had downtime. I never allowed myself to have fun or really enjoy my life, quite frankly. And he could see it. He knew I was burnt out and that it actually, was coming out as resentful. I was almost resenting my job, and I loved what I did. I have always, advocated for people with disabilities, and, my job was to negotiate with health plans all around the country and lead a team. And I loved doing that. But it got to a point where I almost resented it because I wasn't doing the things that fulfill me. So I think it's really important to know that, setting goals, you should set both professional goals if you're working but you should also set personal goals. And so this year, I think the reason that, it's important to set goals is that it gives us something to look forward to. And at times in my life, I've had times where, after I lost my job after 30 years with the same company, my job was eliminated and I was under a non-compete, non-solicit agreement for a year. So I really just didn't know what I was going to go do. And I also didn't feel like I had goals. I didn't feel like, I lived my passion. I was working. This was what my purpose and passion was. So how was I going to stay passionate about what I was doing? And at the time, that's when the podcast came about. And my daughter said, why don't you just start? I thought about doing a podcast because I wanted to continue to bring visibility to people with disabilities. And since I wasn't doing that in my job, I thought, well, how am I going to continue to do that? And I remembered all the cool stories of like all these people that were in my life that I used to really enjoy telling, going and meet with health plans and explaining to them that, hey, I knew this woman who literally had multiple surgeries and, she couldn't get out of bed, and how important it was for us to be able to fix her wheelchair. And I love sharing these stories, and so I thought, how do I keep bringing visibility? Because believe it or not, like when I would work with these health plans, they don't hear these stories. They don't know what people struggle with or what their challenges are. So I really loved being the voice, to be able to tell them like the things that you're doing when you develop policy or you're developing, these rules or restrictions in policy. These are really affecting real people and people with disabilities that need complex wheelchairs to be mobile and independent. And so I was just enjoying telling stories. So I thought, how do I keep telling these stories? How do I keep bringing bigger visibility for people with disabilities? And so the podcast is why I started thinking about See the Unseen, see the things that people have challenges with, and so that people could start to make a difference and change these people's lives. And so then I was on a podcast that was the Locks guys, Todd Locks and Ross. They had a podcast, and they still do, called Eat, Slay, Live, I believe. And I was on the podcast and I was talking about this, and I said, I don't know if I want to do it or not. And they said, Todd looked me in the face and said, well, Melissa, I gave him the idea that I was thinking about this podcast called See the Unseen, where I bring visibility to people with disabilities and, people who don't feel seen or heard. And he said, well, if you don't do this podcast, then, people with disabilities won't get what they need. And I thought, really? Don't put that evil on me, Todd Locks. Okay. So, but then I started thinking about it, he's right. Like if we don't take the steps and do something to, be in servant leadership, to do things to help people, or to do, apply the things that God puts in our heart, then how are we helping people? So anyway, I started thinking, about goals this year, and I'll tell you a little story about this, which I do love goals. I think that, it's a clean slate. Right now it's 2024. Tomorrow will be the first day of 2025. And if you haven't set your goals, then, hey, I'm here to help you do that. But Andy and I have been kind of brainstorming about this, and, something you should know about Andy, my husband, he is a dreamer. And he's got really great ideas, and they just come flooding in his mind all the time. I am a practical doer. Like I do what I say I'm going to do. And it's my pet peeve for someone to say, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, and then they don't do it. Well, I wouldn't say that Andy doesn't do what he says he's going to do, but I do think he has a lot of great ideas. And because he's busy and because he has all these ideas, he doesn't always do what he says he's going to do. So I'm not trying to dog Andy on this podcast or anything. But anyway, we were talking about this, and, I've been trying to watch what I eat. I wanted to lose a certain amount of weight. I wanted to be, healthier. And, we were like, oh, we're going to, eat more Atkins. We're going to eat carbs. And then, I watch him eat carbs, and I'm thinking, like, I got kind of irritated. I was kind of being bratty about a week ago. And he was like, let's develop relationship goals. And I thought, that's real sweet. That's awesome. Let's do that. But then I kept thinking, well, I don't want to just develop goals and not do them. And that irritates me. Like, again, if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. So I also don't want to stress myself out and say I'm going to do all these things and then not do them. And so I was kind of irritated, and I wasn't really into the whole goal setting with Andy. Which I will say, because I'm kind of making Andy sound like he doesn't follow through with his goals. But he is very, I think we both are hard-headed. And I will say that one time I said that he could not go without food for like 4 days because he wanted me to fast. And I said, I'm never fasting because that's ridiculous. I would probably pass out. And I said, you couldn't do that anyway either. And he proceeded to literally go without food for 4 days. I mean, he literally did not eat nothing. All he did was like drink water for 4 days. So when he sets his mind to something, he certainly does it. And he's so good about setting goals when it comes to his profession and SWAT and all these things, and even like he's done couch to 50K because he literally did not train for this 50K run in Idaho or Utah, and just literally went and ran whatever it is, 34 miles or something like that without even training. So anyway, that just gives you a little bit of background on the conversations that Andy and I have had about, goal setting. But anyway, I was being bratty. I wasn't for sure I was even in the mood to set goals, and who's he to tell me what goals that we need to set, even though they were relationship goals, and that was really sweet. So anyway, I said, let's just decide not to talk about goals right now, because I could tell he was getting a little bit like, why don't you want to set goals? But I was in my mind thinking, because you're not eating healthy right now and you're not following through with that. And anyway, I was just not in the mood. So then we go fast forward about a week later. We go to church, and Pastor Josh, this last Sunday, it was all about what does God want to do with you in 2025? So we looked at each other and I said, look, we didn't even have to figure out goals, because Pastor Josh figured it out for us, because we are to write these goals down. And then we're supposed to go up front and really pray about it and ask God, what does he want for us in 2025? So I thought, how perfect is this? And I started thinking, and he said, and then they had big easels up front, and they wanted you to go up front and also write down, how does God showed up in your life in 2024? And at first I was like, I don't know. I mean, let's think about this. And it's so interesting that we kind of forget, right, throughout the year of like what transpired. But then all of a sudden I started thinking, well, number one, Kaylee was baptized this year. Then I started thinking about Shane, my little grandbaby, who's 2. There was a dedication for him. Then I thought, you know what? We got married. We got married in 2024 in March. How did I forget that? That wasn't that long ago. We went through counseling with our pastor before we got married, and which was literally life-changing as well. Let's see, we enrolled in our church group. So we've been going to church group every other Sunday. And this church group is a group of women and men or couples, and not all couples, but we come together and we have dinner, and then we go apart, and the women go and we do kind of Bible study and talk about people on our top 5 and people who we need to pray for, and the things that we need prayers for. So we did that. We decided to build a house in town. I lost my job. So I went to Mexico. I came back, went to Mexico again because I was marrying two friends of ours, a guy who used to work for me, and a friend, Tadamia, who I introduced. And after 3 years, they were engaged, and then they got married, and I married them, which I'm just now remembering now. I literally married them on a beach. So we did that. So when I came back, I lost my job because the company needed to make some different financial decisions with some challenges that they had. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? And I started going down a consulting path. And then I met with I had 3 different clients that I started consulting for. And then I met my employer today, who offered me a position. And I really loved my boss now. And so I got a new job. That's happened in 2024. I think about the podcast that I've done. I did a podcast in March that was Jason Koger, who was the only man in the world with two bionic arms, and there are two articulating bionic arms. And I shared his story. I shared JD Shelburne was on my podcast. He had the #1 video on CMT called Cars and Trucks. I interviewed him. I started thinking about all these things that happened in 2024, which we kind of forget, right? And during those times, I remembered how God showed up in my life in such a big way. And I was talking to a lady who is a psychologist yesterday, and I actually was talking. She also is a friend, and I was talking to her yesterday, and she said, "Remember about a year ago?" She's like, "What's going on in your life?" And so I tell her, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, remember a year ago you were like in tears, and you said, I'm just feel so lonely, and I'm out here in the country, and I work from home, and I don't talk to anyone, and I just want to build a house in town." And I said, that's been a year, hasn't it? And it was a year and about 3 months ago that I was I just felt so alone. I wasn't really working with a lot of people, even in, I would say when you're doing consulting, you're meeting, I met with a lot of different CEOs. I was networking, but it's not like being part of a team. Like when you are working in corporate America, a lot of times you're part of a team and you get to meet all these different people. I was meeting with health plans, and feeling like you're a part of something where you can actually see what you're doing and how it makes a difference. And so I don't know, it was just like she reminded me that I was in such a bad place that it's hard to believe that in a year, what happened was I decided to just keep giving it to God. And I was grinding so much. And this probably comes from a little bit of my origin story, because I did not grow up with money. Only the rich kids went to college, and I went to about 3 years of college and never finished college. So I have a lot of in my past had a lot of limited beliefs, and I can say they still creep in my mind sometimes. And when I didn't have a job or didn't know what I was going to do, I go almost into panic mode, right? So I was just grinding. I was just connecting with every single person. And through all of that, what am I going to do? And I remember also being in my women's group at church and talking to the pastor's wife. And I said, "Bethany, how do you know what God wants you to do?" And she said, "Well, you pray about it. And you ask God to close the doors where he doesn't want you and open the doors where he does." And finally, I just thought, you know what? I need to do that. And so and also I would say that a routine that I got into this past year that was really life-changing for me too, is that every day I will read a Bible verse, and then I will send it out to my family and then some friends. And then it became colleagues that I worked with. And then I just keep adding people. And I probably have about 20 some people on this list. And for those of you that are on my Bible verse list, I don't think that I just send it out in a group. Like, I literally think about you every single day, because I'm taking a picture of this Bible verse and then I'm sending it to every single person. And while I'm thinking about that person, right after that, I pray. And I pray, and I did a podcast on this too. You can check it out on my YouTube site, is how to pray in 3 to 5 minutes. But I pray for all of those individual people that I send my Bible verses to, and also to others. But basically, when I was talking to Bethany and saying, what do I do? How do I pray about this? Like, what does God want for me? And so I would ask God to, first of all, just come into my heart, forgive me of my sins. And then I thank God for all the blessings in my life, and all my family and my friends and my home and my job and my puppies, and, just all of the things, my health, the clothes on my back, the food we eat. And then I ask the Holy Spirit to come into my heart, and I ask him, like, what do you want from me? And to please close the doors where you don't want me and open the doors where you do. And I can tell you, I was really struggling because my heart has always been in the complex wheelchair industry. I mean, I did it for 30 years and I knew I was making a difference and helping people. But I was also pretty burnout on it. And you know, my job was eliminated and I really had a hard time thinking, do I really want to go help all the competitors? No, not really. But I also was like, you know what? I want to help the industry because this is an industry I love. So I was really struggling with that. Struggling of whether do I go help these guys that like I had done so well in my job at New Motion that a lot of these smaller companies didn't get contracts because of it. Or, you know, and weren't able to provide. And so like I was thinking, you know, I kind of was kind of pulled in different directions of like, I want to help the industry, but I also, you know, I don't know, it's really hard to go back and like fight for the underdog, if you will, because we are a really big company. And some of these companies are very small and they don't have the resources and it's harder for them to get contracts. So anyway, long story short, I did take on 3 clients, but a lot of different places, they A, couldn't afford me, or B, they wanted me just to be on their board, or they wanted me to just do a little work here or there. And they're like, well, right now it's a hard time, you know, and a lot of them are struggling financially. And so they didn't necessarily have work for me. But, you know, but then I was really in a month and a half, I was really moving forward in this consulting route. But I kept praying about it. And I kept praying that, you know, do I just retire? Do I go do something else? Like, I mean, I was literally looking at Purina dog chow. Okay. Like, am I going to go work for Purina after I spent 30 years of my life advocating for people with disabilities? Like, does God want me to go sell dog food? Like, I was really like confused. Right. And so I just kept praying about it and praying that God would, you know, put me where I belong and help me to, you know, close the doors where you don't want me, open the doors where you do. And that's when I was basically doing a consulting call for the company I'm at now, which is called HR Healthcare. And, you know, 2 brothers were on the phone. They are a family owned organization. And I thought I was having a consulting call with them. And anyway, they just said, hey, can you come up to Pennsylvania and meet with us? And I did. And I hit it off with the CEO, and he was very humble, kind, smart. And I remember when he asked me, he's like, could you see yourself working for this company? And I said, well, and probably I'm way too vocal sometimes, but I said, well, if I'm being honest, I was kind of not sure if I wanted to go work for another male CEO, because sometimes, you know, CEOs can be kind of, you know, arrogant or cocky. And so I was like, maybe I want to be my own boss. That's what I was thinking. And, but I go, you know what? And I told my boss, I said, you're nothing like that. Like, you were so humble and kind and smart and and he's very young, you know, he's a lot younger than me, about 20 years younger than me. And so, you know, and he came, you know, from, I would say his family was well off. And I wondered, like, are these guys going to be, you know, rich, spoiled guys, or, you know, and they're not. They come from such a great family. But those are the things, you know, right? We always, like, we're quick to judge. And that's something that, you know, not that I was judging. This is what came to me. And I was like, I don't know if this is what I want to do or not. But I felt good about it. And another thing is, they are a catheter business. And I also thought, how will I ever be passionate about something again like I am wheelchairs? And so my brother almost literally died of a urinary tract infection this year. That's another thing I didn't even really kind of think about. And when I think about the blessings and the things that have happened and how God has worked in my life this year, my brother had a urinary tract infection in the end of May, beginning of June. Went in to one hospital, they sent him home, went over to St. Louis, went to Barnes, Wash U, and they almost sent him home and said, you know what, let's do one more test. And he ended up with he had an abscess on his spine. And they said, if we don't do this emergency surgery right now, there's a chance that you're literally going to die, or you might be paralyzed. And so, any long story short, and I could get into all the weeds of this, but they did the surgery. My brother was paralyzed from pretty much the neck down. He could barely move his arm just up like this. This is it. No movement in his whole body. And I remember the doctors looked at me and said, "Aren't you the sister that used to work for the wheelchair company?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, and I thought he's going to be in a complex wheelchair his whole life. And anyway, we saw this one little tiny movement in his toe. And the nurse said, "Oh no, that's not anything. That's because of the things that he's got on his legs." And I said, "Oh, I could have swore I saw his toe move, but maybe not." And anyway, they kept saying, day by day, if in 36 hours he doesn't change, this is how he's going to be. And so in 36 hours, he really didn't change that much. And I said, "You guys all need to get on board here and know that he's going to come home, and we need to get a ramp, because I'm in work mode now. We need to get a ramp. We need to get a complex wheelchair. We're like, how's he going to get around when it's time to come home?" And I remember we were at the hospital, and Andy asked my brother, "Can I pray for you and pray over you?" And my brother said yes, and he had tears coming down his eyes. And my brother's not I wouldn't say, I think in the past he wasn't certainly a religious person, but he certainly has a story that how literally a miracle happened. Because I remember looking at Andy and I said afterwards, after he prayed over him, I said, "If my brother comes out of this and he's not paralyzed, it will be a complete miracle." And my brother believes that Andy started that process. It wasn't Andy. Andy prayed for him, but it was certainly the power of prayer, and God came through for my brother because every single day he got a little better, and it was just crazy. He went to the St. Louis Rehab Institute. He was in a complex wheelchair. He went into a manual chair. He started down using a walker. He is now walking, and he's literally up on a ladder. For those of you who know my brother, he's determined, and he just doesn't take no for an answer. And he said he's going to get through this, and he kept saying he's going to walk again. And I'm thinking, I don't know about that, because I was just being a realist. But I can tell you that was a miracle. And so the reason I tell you all this too, thinking about my job, is like, I knew that I wanted to help people that need catheters, that need, for people who, don't use them the right way, or get an infection. It could lead to something like MRSA. And my brother had 3 blood infections. And so, by taking care of people in the right way and then getting the right products, I thought, I could get behind that. I can get passionate about that again. And so that's really why I decided to go work for HR Healthcare. And so, I thought I can help them to grow. They're a company that's growing, who is young, and it's exciting and fun. And here's the other thing about how God showed up with this, is that the first week that I was working, I got on a video call, and we were with our CFO, and the former CEO of a company that we had acquired. And their names are Dallas and Dave. And I get on this call, and Dave, our CFO, is just smiling from ear to ear. He's like always happy. All the times that I got on the phone call, and I said, "How are you so happy, Dave? Like, why are you so happy?" And he said, "Well, Melissa, but you really want to know the answer?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I just feel super blessed." He said, "I have Jesus in my life." And I was like, wow, that's so awesome that our CFO just literally said that. Because in corporate America, you don't always get to talk about, religion or God. And, and that's not how it should be, but that's typically sometimes how it is. And then Dallas sat there and he said, "Well, I have a story too." And he started telling me a story about his sister who suffered an injury and ended up in a complex wheelchair. And that's how he became passionate about what he was doing. And he talked about how God just changed his life, and he shared his story. And I said, "This is crazy. Like, the fact that you guys are talking about how God's changed your life and what it means to be a Christian." And then we started talking. Our CEO comes on, Colby, and he says, what are you guys talking about? And I said, well, we're talking about maybe, and we started talking about how we want to do a Bible study. And he's like, yeah, count me in. I was like, what? Like, what is happening right now? So I know it's a long story to get to my point of the fact that God shows up. This is what I was praying for, God put me in the right job, put me in the right place. And not only God put me in, a place where they appreciate what I do, what I bring to the table, all my 32 years of expertise. And then they're Christians, and here is a CEO, CFO, and former CEO that wants to, talk about God and wants to do Bible verses each day. So I feel extremely blessed that, maybe for a year ago was different. And now I just really love what I'm doing. And I love that, that it's, that I get to work with just wonderful people, doing really great work for people who need catheters. And I get to go meet with all of my former customers that all the health plans that I've worked with. So that's been great as well. So I guess what I'm saying when I think about, here's another thing that you could do, by the way. If you're setting goals, if you want to reflect back on what happened throughout the year, like what are the things that you did that were great that you want to keep doing? What are the things that you don't want to do? So if you go back, another thing that you can do is go back on your phone on all your photos. So if you go back in your photos and you look in January and February and March, and you can kind of write down the things that you did or you accomplished. You can also then helps you to kind of figure out, like, what are the things I don't want to do? What are the things that I want to start doing in 2025? So in 2025, when we were at church and we wrote down, all the things that happened in 2024, but we also, what Pastor Josh said to do is to write our goals for 2025. And so Andy and I did that. We both went up forward and we prayed about it. And so, some of my goals are like, and I just took a photo of them. And one is to use the podcast, to reach 25 plus people, to help them understand who God is and help them to get to know God. We want to, of course, improve upon our marriage. We want to learn to pray together and spend time together. We want to have church group at our house. I want to figure out a way to give back in a bigger way, or to those in need. I want to have a closer relationship with my friends and family, continue to seek my purpose and passion in life, change my heart for certain people in my life. There are times when I have, had some bad thoughts about people, and I don't want to feel that way. And this year, I can tell you that I've prayed about that a lot, change my heart, change my thoughts, my feelings for certain person, change their heart towards me. And honestly, I've seen God show up in that. And, baby steps have happened, and things that I think about that, nothing I did, nothing I tried to do ever worked. And when I prayed about it, that's when it worked. So I say, continue to encourage and pour into the people that I send my Bible verses to. That's another goal of mine. And I would just say too, that to focus on the positive, this is what's really also worked for me when setting goals, is I know we can focus on all the negative in our life. And at times I can go down a rabbit hole like nobody's business. And in life, I feel like every time, and I think counseling is great for people, and I've been to counseling, but anytime I'd always focus on the problem, it seems like I would just go down a rabbit hole and start spiraling, and I'll find a way to sabotage like things. And so I think for me, focusing on the positive and having goals has been life-changing for me. I think that when you focus on your problems, you make more problems, okay? Because that's where your mind's going. So all the time, what we think, we feel in our emotions, and that's what we do, right? So if we focus on the positive, when we focus on what we want, our mind will figure out a way to get there. And if we pray about it, then God's going to help us get there. And so part of the goal setting, I know Andy was like, okay, we're going to, we want to start a foundation. We want to do this. We want to do that. And I thought these are all great things, but, and then he was trying to figure out like, how are we going to do that? I would just encourage you, you don't have to have all the answers. Write down, 3 to 5 goals of what you want to do or what you want for your life, and pray about it. Don't try and figure it out, because sometimes God's way, well, not sometimes, God's way is always better than our ways. And so you don't have to have it all figured out. You could say, for me, I pray about my podcast. I don't know, what's that going to look like, or speaking, or my job, or whatever. It's like, I allow God to put the right people in my life, put the right ideas in my heart, in my mind. Take, for instance, I'm going to have this year, Joan Bastos, who was the Golden Bachelorette on ABC. She's going to be on my podcast this year in January. So that's something that, I prayed about. And that's the beauty of praying about things. It's like, you want what God wants for you, right? So if something doesn't happen, you can always be like, well, you know what? I don't care about that, because that's not what God wants for my life. So if I pray about it and it doesn't happen, I'm not going to get upset. And I can tell you that this has been a really challenge for me to have this inner peace, to trust God with my life, because at times I always wanted to figure it out myself. I'd stress out. But I can tell you, in this past year of, number one, putting God first in my life has changed my life. I don't do anything until I wake up and I look at my Bible verse and I pray. And I try and do that every single day and put him first. And then it's your marriage, and then it's your kids, and then it's your work and all the things. But the way that Pastor Josh always explained it to us is, or Pastor Tim as well, is it's kind of like this: God's first, your spouse, your kids, and then your job. And anytime that these are upside down, then you're not in alignment with what God wants for your life. And so I try and remember that, because you know what? He'll help us work all the other stuff out. So I think that's really what I wanted to say today. I hope that this episode has helped somebody today. I pray about this. I want people to, the reason I do the podcast is really because I want to help those people who, things that I've gone through, that I've struggled with, and I've gone through it. I just hope to help people like that. So I don't do it for the money. I don't do it to give, glory to myself or to bring attention to myself. In fact, it's very difficult sometimes to get on these podcasts. I know I talked to Andy one time and I said, I haven't done it in a while. And when then you don't do something, it's like exercising. If you don't do it every single day, getting back on, it's more difficult. All the things didn't work right today. I had to get them all together. And even speaking in front of people, having the confidence to get up and to speak and to know that, this is going to reach a bunch of people, or even if it reaches 2 people. I mean, it's like, I still get nervous when I speak, and I do this all the time. And so even, Andy, one of his, I would say he doesn't like to speak in front of people. And that was one thing he did this year, is speak in front of the church. And he said, what do you mean you get nervous? I was like, I get nervous every single time that I speak. I spoke in front of 1,000 people. I've spoken in front of a couple people, but I'm speaking in front of this camera and nobody's even in here. So I still get nervous, but I still do it. And the reason I do it is to keep challenging myself and keep making the little small steps to reach a bigger goal. Because if we don't get started, we're not going to go anywhere, right? So, I would just encourage you to take the small steps, write down your goals, write down your personal, and 3 to 5. Don't go crazy. You don't want to do 10 goals, because you'll never meet all of those. But, think about 3 to 5 goals, both personally and professionally, that you want to accomplish in 2025. That's really going to be a better you. I think about, I used to cuss all the time. I had a bad potty mouth. I prayed about it. I said, God, please, and I liked cussing too sometimes, if I'm being honest, like nothing feels better like when you're aggravated to say the F-bomb. But I didn't like what that said about me, because I also thought, if I want to encourage other people to come to know God, how am I, if they see me talk like that, how am I feel like a hypocrite. And not like you can't cuss and be a Christian. Like, seriously, we're all sinners and we're all going to make mistakes. But I do feel like I wanted God to take that away from me, because I wanted God to continue to refine me, to be a better person, to be a better Christian. And none of us are perfect. But it's crazy how just praying about that, I rarely cuss anymore. Like, every now and then I might throw something out, but it's amazing whenever you're praying and asking God to take something away from you, how he does, and how you want to be a better person. You want to be a better Christian. And especially when you're talking to God and you're praying about it, like, you don't want to disappoint God. Right. So, I would just encourage you to, if you're going through a hard time right now, I'd say just, pray about it, write your goals down, but then pray about it, because, God will get you out of a difficult situation. And I'm not saying that I still don't have times that are difficult times, but this year has been transforming for me, just because I continue to strive to give my anytime I have anxiety or fear or anything, give it to God. So I hope this podcast was helpful to you today, and I want to wish all of you a very successful and prosperous 2025. And thank you for listening to the podcast. And I just encourage you to go on and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's called See the Unseen Podcast. I'm on Spotify, Amazon Prime, Apple Podcasts, all the things. So here's to 2025 and making our goals. Thank you.